you can see I've got my bridge heater out. I've already made it up in my mind that this is probably going to be the hardest neck removal I've ever done. You know, there's so much fretboard here. This is more than normal. That's the first problem. Number two, this is a curved top. The piece that goes under here, the extension under the fretboard, is contoured to match. It's all glued. It's just complicated. This old top is very brittle. Top part of the neck, it's actually loose in the dovetail, I think, but the rest of this is not. So it really is going to depend on how hard this is. If I can get this loose here, then I think it may be halfway easy, but I'm not expecting this to be an easy fix right through here to get all this loose. So I'm heating it up. I just turned this on. It's up to 190 degrees Fahrenheit right now. We're gonna have to get it up to around 400 degrees probably to do any good. So we'll show you as we make progress. Well, my friends, as I suspected, this is going to be very difficult to get off. I have got this turned up to 420 degrees. Presently, it's actually above that. It's at 435 degrees. I've never used anything that hot before, and I'm getting almost nothing out of it. It's not even wanting to cooperate at all, and I kind of felt like that was the way it was going to go. I'm barely getting anything out of it by heating it that much. There we go. I just got some progress right there on camera. That's unusual because we never usually get progress while it's on camera. It's always, you know, when the camera goes on, everything goes wrong. But that actually worked that time. Maybe I'll get lucky and get something on this side now. There we go. Getting a little bit. Maybe that extra heat is finally paying off. Yep, I think it is, finally. Yep, finally. Wow, that's a relief, because I was really getting worried because I wasn't getting anywhere for the longest time. Yeah, that's working now, finally. That's a real relief, but I think I'm only getting the fretboard. I don't think I'm getting the extension under there. That might be a problem too. But right now, I'll take the fretboard. You know, it might be that I'm going to have to do something I don't want to do, and that is I might have to pull this fret here and cut the fretboard off right there. It'll have a little line right here on both sides that you would be able to see. But then again, we're going to put a binding around it and you'd never see it. So may have to do that, because I don't think the heat's going to penetrate through the fretboard and through the extension underneath there to let me pull this whole thing off. I don't know. I'm going to keep working at it. If I make any progress, I'll show you where we're at. Now, after another 4 or 5 minutes, the only progress I've actually made is I've got the fretboard itself free, but the extension is still down. This might be enough to let the neck come out, but honestly, I'm not holding out much hope because of not being able to get to the dovetail, either taking the whole fretboard off or cutting the fretboard off, as I said, at the fret. I may have to go that route. It'll be a last resort if I do that, but it might have to happen. I'm just trying to get down to get the fretboard loose, at least to where I'm satisfied it's past the dovetail, and I think we're there pretty much. It hasn't been easy. It's a tough one, I can tell you for sure. It's tight. You know, everybody always talks about hide glue, you can remove it with heat. Well, yeah, sometimes you can. You know, sometimes it's not that easy. So, you know, it's not that much different than tight bond. Tight bond really sometimes comes apart even easier than this does with heat. It just depends on the circumstances and on the instrument. There's no black and white one way or the other. It's about as much as I can do with that. So I'm going to set this aside for a few minutes, and I'm going to wiggle this now and see if I can, yeah, oh, look at there. That's the first time I've tried to move it, and it's wiggling like crazy, which is a great sign. Oh man, I'm happy with that. Maybe I'll get lucky for once. Now the problem is, if they've covered up the dovetail with this extension, it can't come out if that extension's on there. But if the dovetail goes through the extension, which is what I'm hoping, or at least there's a hole there, then it can pull out. But I don't know. Oh, I think it might be pulling out. It's coming out. Hey, look at there. One time in my life I got lucky. Look at there. And there's no glue on that at all. I don't know what I was seeing when I was looking in the microscope, but there's no glue on that at all. They sure did put glue all around the outside edge. There's no question about that. So in hindsight, I probably could have glued it back, but the problem is I would have never got glue back in here and, you know, on all this. So really, in the long run, this is still the better way to do it. I think we did the right thing by taking it apart. I'm also thinking we did the right thing by leaving the extension on there now. I was going to try to pry that extension off of there, but I'm glad I didn't now. I'm glad I left it. Woohoo! Really did catch a break there. That's like one of the first times I've ever really caught a break on something like this. I am excited, as you can probably tell. Well, my friends, off camera, I have spent probably 15 minutes cleaning up this joint. And, you know, I've got the glue off of it. It didn't have much glue on it, to be honest with you. I guess that's probably why it broke. I don't know. They just didn't seem to get glue in there very well. I've dry clamped it back up off camera just to test it out to see if it's going to line up, and it looks like it lines up fine. So I don't see any point in belaboring it. I'm not going to take this piece out because this piece seems solid, and like they say, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And this piece is solid as it can be, and all this would be, it would be a nightmare to try to get this out of there in one piece. So I'm just not going to mess with that. I'm just going to bypass that and go with the rest of it, and I think it'll work. Time will tell. The main thing is to coat this baby with glue really well, you know, and make sure that all the surfaces are glued up right. I honestly think it'll hold just fine. We'll give this one a little more time than normal. Most of the time, like the next day, I will string them up. On this one, I'm going to give it at least 2 days to dry thoroughly because I just don't want to take any chances. That gets the joint part, and then we'll have to do the extension. You know, I don't think you could coat it any better than that. Now on this extension, I'm not going to try to get a ton of glue on this because if it ever has to come off again, and the extension, you know, isn't really a, well, I don't know. In some ways it is very important because it can help hold that neck angle. So I don't want to skimp on the glue. I want to glue it well, but I'm not too concerned about this part here. All right. Well, there you go. We're going to put her back together. And I'm wiggling it back together to seat itself down in there just right. I think it's going to be just fine. We're going to be able to clamp it. I've got this leather pad on here. We'll go from the heel to the pad. You can start to see the squeeze out already. This big heavy clamp will certainly put the pressure on it. You can see how it's squeezed it together, and it looks fine right now. Let's take the glue off of that and see what it looks like. That looks really good, and it's actually really tight. I didn't think that crack would tighten up that much, but it's tight. Thank goodness they didn't get any glue down in the actual crack. I don't know why they bothered to put glue around it because I can still see the glue around it that they put on there, but they didn't get any glue down inside the crack. And that just blows me away. It's fairly obvious that whoever did try to glue this back years ago was not a glue expert because of the way all the glue issues that we've had with this thing. It's pretty amazing. Boy, that feels good. You can't even really feel the break, other than you can feel the glue that they stuck on the outside there, which we'll get off later. I'm not worried about that right now because it's not in the way. It's not hurting anything. That looks just perfect. We can clamp this back down, and I think it's going to be fine. I really think this thing will be just perfectly fine now. Sometimes I do things and I I have all kinds of doubts about it, but I don't have any doubt about this. I think it's going to be perfectly fine. This clamp has leather on both sides already. So I'm going to stick it back in here. Actually, I think I'm going to go ahead and put a block under this to help spread this clamping force out through here. That's working pretty well. We'll do the same thing over here. That's working pretty well too. Now we'll put one more clamp right on the tail end here. I may have to go find me a clamp for that. Well, there you go, my friends. That thing is clamped up. It's as tight as it can be clamped up. I don't think you could do it any better. And now we'll just go clean up the glue squeeze out. But I seriously think that that thing is lined up right. Everything went right back together perfectly. It all lined up perfectly. So I'm thankful they didn't get glue down in there, but I think it's going to work just fine now. So we're going to give that 24 hours before we take the clamps off. I won't have to worry about it because I'll be able to start working on the back after we get the clamps off. It'll be several days before we actually string this thing anyway, so we'll be fine. I said I was going to let this set overnight before I took the clamps off, and that would be a great thing to do. But sometimes you just got to do what you got to do. And that is, I've already got one instrument I'm building in progress that I'm working on. I've got 3 repairs going on. I don't really want to start yet another project until I get some of these out of the way. So I'm going back to this one because I can't work on the other ones at the moment because of one reason or another. In order to keep production going, I'm going to go ahead and take the clamps off this. It's been sitting for nearly 4 hours clamped up, so it should be fine that way. I'm not going to disturb that area really. I'm going to be working on the back and the inside, cleaning it up and getting it ready so that I can get the back on this thing. Maybe yet tonight I may glue the back onto it. And of course, before I go to putting the back on this thing, the thing you want to do is really inspect everything. This is your chance. Well, I notice right here, these little side supports is missing right here. So I've cut a piece of spruce that we can put back in there. And of course it looks brand new, but that's okay. At least it'll fill the bill and it's a perfect match size-wise. So I'm going to take my little tool and carve it like the other ones are carved. They're rounded off, kind of dome shaped. The other thing I've noticed is some of these other little side supports are loose in there too, so we're going to fix that as well, but we're going to put the one in that's missing first. Now the ends are tapered off, so I'm going to taper the end off on this one. These little finger planes, they sure make short work of this kind of thing if you learn how to use them. They're not the easiest to use, and especially not the easiest to learn how to use. But once you get the hang of it, these things really do shorten the time span on a lot of little projects. And now this looks hand carved just like the other ones that are in there. And over time it'll age and turn color just like they did. The only difference is 100 years down the road when somebody's doing this again, they'll look at this one and they'll say, well, this is a much higher quality piece of spruce than the rest of those. I wonder why they put in such a good piece here and the rest of them were crummy. We're going to put it in there. So let's get the glue on it. And they've got a line right where it goes, so we'll put it right back where it was. And the only other thing we'll do is we'll clean up our glue squeeze out. And now it looks just like the rest of them. All we got to do is clamp it in place. I'm putting a wedge in there because that way I can clamp the top of the little brace there too. It's pushing it in tighter there. That'll make it better. Now while that one's drying, I noticed a couple other ones were loose. You tap on them and you can hear it. This one's loose here. So if it's all the way loose where we take it out and fix it or just get glue behind it, I'm not convinced yet one way or the other on that. Yeah, it needs to come out. See, we just take it out and we'll put it right back in place. We'll clean off all the old glue off of it first. We'll clean out in here too a little bit. and we'll put her right back in place. Okay, that one's another one fixed, and that one seems to be fine, but there's a couple over on this side that are loose, so we'll have to fix those too. This one here is loose, and I imagine it'll come out of there also. Yeah, it will. You can see how the little ink mark in this case transferred to this piece from all those years. And we'll again scrape off the old glue, which is pretty much powder at this point. Doesn't take much to scrape it off because it's just like powder. I'm not going to continue filming this. There's one or two more of these I'm doing, but I'm doing the exact same thing on all of them. So here's a look at it after all those are clamped up. You can see this is the one I put in new. And these two are okay, this one's okay, but this one was loose, this one was loose, this one. So there's 4 loose ones and one that was missing. The rest of them seem to be okay. I don't see any problems. You know, if they're not loose, I don't want to break them loose. So, you know, they seem to be fine as far as I can tell, the rest of them. But we're going to give it a real good looking over. I don't know if you've really noticed on the inside, and I haven't pointed it out, but you know, it's the ladder bracing, but it's different than most that I've seen, I think. At least I don't think I've seen it like this. I may have seen it and just forgot. But it's wide at the top and gets narrow toward the base end back here, toward the back. I generally see them go the opposite way. Either they're parallel or they get wider. I don't recall seeing them get narrower like this. So I just thought I'd point that out as something quite different. I've seen this more toward where the bridge would be. This is up pretty close to the sound hole. And it looks to be original. It looks like that's where it's always been. So as far as I can tell, that looks right. It doesn't look like that's come loose and been re-glued. Although now that I'm doing this, I'm hearing a little click. Hear that click? That's weird. I'll have to investigate and see if I can figure out what that click is. It's kind of a weird little deal. There must be something loose there. Yeah, I think that brace is actually slightly loose, but just barely loose. Yeah, I think it is. So I'll have to figure out how I'm going to get glue under there. That's what it is. The very end of this little brace is making a noise inside this brace here because it kind of goes under that brace. That is weird. Good thing I twisted on that, or I would have never known that. While we got it apart, we might as well fix that too, if we can. See if I can get the X-Acto knife under it there a little bit, clean it out a little bit. Something ain't right. I don't know exactly what's wrong. I'm gonna monkey with that a little bit off camera and see if I can figure out what it is, and I'll let you know. And wow, upon even more examination, this is just slightly loose at the very tip end down here too. Golly, it just doesn't want to give up. Oh my goodness. Yeah, we're gonna have to get glue under that and get that clamped down. It's not completely loose, it's just loose at the very tip end. This baby girl needed some serious TLC. What I'm gonna do is use the glue as like a syringe kind of, again, the glue bottle, and I'm gonna force it back under there, and you can see it went through, and it went through the brace, so it's completely under the brace. And if anything, I'll use this little wedge to get more glue back under there. That's gonna work. There you go. So now we gotta get a clamp on that and it'll be fine. Well, as you can see, that's way overkill for that little piece. The clamp is just huge, but you gotta have something that can reach down in there the full depth. It takes a bigger clamp. I'm gonna look at the end of this one now because I suspect it's got the same problem. And I think it does. Yep, it does. My goodness. I'm pretty sure one of these days I'll finish with all this, though I can't be sure. There you can see it squeezed through, I think, maybe. It squeezed all the way through. And again, I wedge itself and get the glue up under there. And that's as good as it's going to get, I believe. We'll get another clamp. Well, you can see I got the clamp on the end of that one too. The rest of the brace seems perfectly solid, and I don't feel like there's a problem at the upper end. Now, I'm still concerned about this because I do think this is, well, I know it's loose, but I just don't know how to get glue under it because this thing goes under these braces, and these braces are tight. The only option I could see would be to just go ahead and cut it off and, you know, take it out of there. I think it's actually loose. So I hate to cut the ends of this brace off, but seriously, I don't think it would hurt a thing if I did. And therefore, I think I'm going to, because I don't know any other way to fix that and get glue under it. It's too tight. There's no space under it, but I am pretty positive it's loose. So I'm gonna go for it. You know, I can't do this after I get the back glued back on it, because you can't fit through that little sound hole and do anything major like this. So here's the time if we're ever going to do it. And the bottom line is, even if it's not loose, and I'm sure it is, but even if it's not loose, we'll still take it off there and clean it and glue it back in place, and it'll last forever. Yep, it's loose. It's not loose all the way across though. It's just loose halfway. But we're going to have to make it loose all the way, I think. You can see there, it goes right under there. So it was definitely loose. I could tell on that end it was loose for sure. It doesn't seem to be loose the rest of the way across, and I'm afraid that I might cause a problem here. I don't want to cause a problem, I just want to fix the thing. There we got it. And it came off perfectly clean, almost no tear out at all. I mean, there is a teeny tiny bit right there, but it's so minor it doesn't matter. Okay, we can clean that all up and we'll glue it back in place. Just for the record, the little tiny end that was glued underneath this brace was loose in there, and I pulled it out with this. I just pulled it out, and I've already glued it and pushed it back in the hole. So the end of that is now back under there, filled that little hole up just like it did always. I don't think it's loose on this side. Doesn't seem to be, so I'm not going to do the same thing over here. I've got the whole thing cleaned off there, but now I'm going to clean off this. Just clean off the old glue. Now we're ready to put her back in place. Assuming we get it clamped up really good and all that, it'll never come loose again. I'm cleaning up just the very tip ends of these, and the reason is that I can't get them down in there, and I'm afraid they're going to set up a little bit. It's just, I think, better in the long run. I think they go down in there now, and now I can clamp it and it'll be perfect. You can probably see I've got 3 clamps on that brace across there. I've got very even glue squeeze out, so that indicates that it's, you know, clamped really well. And we're just cleaning it up now. And since I've used almost every clamp I've got on this thing, when I thought I was already done, I guess I'm just going to quit, because if I keep looking, I'll keep finding, I'm sure. No, I'm just going to let it rest for the evening, and I'll come back and give it one last final inspection before we try to put the back on it.
My friends, I realize it's only been mere seconds for you, but for me, it's been overnight. And this has been sitting and curing, and I've taken all the clamps off of it now. Now keep in mind, I actually thought I was ready to put the back on it yesterday. I was just going to do a little final inspection. And in that little final inspection, I found 8 loose parts. So, how much confidence do you have that I should put the back on it? I don't have a whole lot of confidence myself. Tapping on it, it sounds just as solid as a rock now, though. I don't hear anything vibrating anymore. I don't feel anything moving. I'm just paranoid now because of all the problems we've had. I couldn't even go back to the beginning of this video and try to remember all the things I've already fixed. We're on the downhill slide, at least by my estimation, even though putting the back on is really a big job, actually. It's not a simple job at all, because nothing wants to line back up. You think, well, you just slap the back on and it's an easy thing. No, it doesn't work that way. After you take the back off of one of these things, everything distorts. it'll get longer, it'll get wider, and it'll be in different places, and now you got to make those sides match that back again. And it doesn't always go real easy. Sometimes it's not hard at all, other times it's crazy hard. I think on this old sucker, it may be really hard. I'm giving it one last look, but I think I'm there. I don't know what else to do. I've done everything I know to do to this thing. Oh yeah, I'm gonna check, that's right, I'm gonna check this kerfing because I do think there might be a problem here. And actually this kerf looks like it's pushed down, so it must be loose. Yep, it is. Well, I found one more, so look right here. If you keep looking, you'll find something. This piece of kerf right here is loose. That's not a big deal. We can fix that. I've already fixed it in a bunch of other places, and of course I've already put new kerf in here. But this part right here is loose, so I've got to fix this. And actually, this is actually broke right here, so I might as well just take this little piece out if it'll come out. Well, maybe not. But I'll get glue down in here and we'll get that clamped up. And we'll let that set a little while before we decide to put the back on it. Just one more thing. Well, there's what the kerf clamps look like there, that just clothespins. I think everything else is fine. I've gone over it time and time again off camera here. I don't see anything else. So once that's done, I think we're ready to put the back on it. I really do. Of course, I've said that before. While that's setting up over there, I'm going to go ahead and work on smoothing this out that I put in yesterday, this decorative end. Try to get this flush because it's sitting up a little bit proud right now. I've got my little finger plane. With this sitting up proud, I think I can just kind of go across it at an angle like this and knock most of the high spots off. A little sander might work on this, but I'm afraid I'd scratch up other parts. I can control this pretty well. That's not working as well as I wanted, so I'm going to go back to a regular chisel and see if I can smooth it off that way. That's working fairly well, but it's still a tedious little job. I think I'm going to go to the sandpaper now and see if we can smooth that out. These little detail sanders sent in to me by one of my viewers are really one of the most handy little things I've ever received. Well, I'm just eating up a lot of camera time sanding, so I'll show you what it looks like up close when we're finished. We are having a major frog strangler outside the window behind the camera there, so you probably hear that. But there's what it looks like now. You notice I darkened it in. That's the way all of them looked that I saw. You know, they just all look that way. I don't know why. I would have thought they would have left it highlighted. But it's not bad. The new wood I put in there is dull looking. Clean all of that up at the end with some linseed oil, and I think we can make it all look pretty darn good. Way better than busted pieces and pieces missing. So I think we're in good shape. I think it's time to see if we can apply this. Now the problem with putting the back on here is putting the back on here. The problem is just simply, it just won't line up very well. It always springs out of shape. When you just look at it quickly, you think, well, that's not too bad. But you can see here, the back is pushed out, an eighth of an inch further than it should be. So I'm gonna have to pull this way in. Pulling that way in is, you know, pushing out places, other places, and maybe not where it needs to, you know, so I'm gonna have to just take this really slow and try to figure it out. And off camera, I'm gonna maybe put some different clamping things to this dry and see how I can get it to fit up, because I've got that original binding and I want to put the binding right back on here, and in order to do that I have to get this really close. And I gotta tell you, that's not easy. It's probably the hardest thing I've done so far on the instrument. Trying to dry fit this all up. When I get it right up here, the sides are sticking out that way about 3/8 of an inch. I mean, they're that far off. So 3/8 of an inch, if you try to push that and squeeze that and try to clamp, it just doesn't work. So I made this little block that fits around the neck heel. You know, it goes against the neck block, pushing against the sides. I put several pieces of leather in here, and I can draw the ends together that way. When I do that, I can draw this end in close enough, but every time I draw this in, this is spreading out. Now,
I don't see how it's going to ever work, because now this is a 1/4 inch out here and it's about 3/16 out here. It's out up here too. It does not look like it's going to go back together. I got to tell you, this is going to be one of the toughest ones I've ever done in terms of trying to get the back on this thing. The back is not in the same shape as the sides, and they don't want to be together. I'm going to have to do some more thinking on this one, because this initial thinking is a good thought, but it's not enough. We're going to have to do more. Well, friends, this is the most clamp monstrosity I've ever built in terms of trying to get sides to match a back. You can see I've got these two big caul things on the outside edges. I don't know if you can actually see it. I can't get the camera far enough away to see it, but there's a pipe clamp going through here pulling these back ends together. There's this clamp pulling this sides together. There's this long clamp pulling the ends together, and it surprisingly lines up pretty darn well, except for kind of right about here and kind of right about here. And the bottom line is, we got 10 pounds of stuff in a 5-pound bag. In other words, we got more sides than we've got perimeter. Seriously, if there was about a full 1/8 of an inch taken out of the sides, like if you could just cut down through there and shrink the sides by about an 1/8 of an inch in terms of their overall length, this would fit up probably. Maybe you might even have to take out a 1/4 inch, but for sure a 1/8 of an inch would help. Had I known that when I put the ends back together back here, I would have, just shortened them by a little bit, because it would help if these sides were shorter. I don't know that I can get this back together and make it work, because it seriously looks good everywhere except back here, and the sides are sticking out past the top 3/16 here and almost 3/16 here, so that's a lot. I don't know how I'm going to do any better than that. So the binding isn't going to work like it is. I'm just going to look at it a little while and see if I can think of a better idea, but right now I can't come up with anything. My friends, I'm having serious troubles lining up this back with the sides. It is completely out of shape. These sides do not want to adhere to the size of this top at all. I have tried every trick I know. I have squeezed it in all the directions I can squeeze it, and getting it as close as I can up on this end, as close as I can get it down here. And you can see that's nearly a 1/4 of an inch from here to the binding. Nearly a 1/4 of an inch. Try to zoom you in there where you can see it a little bit closer. But it's really far off. And that's not the only place. It's off over here. Now I moved the whole thing. It was off over here too. The bottom line is there's more perimeter of side than there is top. You can't squeeze it in and make it small enough to fit this top anymore. It's sprung over years and years and years, and it does not want to go back. I seriously don't know what else I can do. So, because of that, you can't just abracadabra make the top bigger. You just can't do that. The only viable option to really fix it like it is would be to take some of the length out of these sides, and of course, had I known that ahead of time, like I said before, right where I put the decorative strip in, I would have just cut out another 1/16 of an inch each piece of the sides, about an 1/8 inch total, and just pulled it together another 1/8 of an inch. And even an 1/8 of an inch might not have been enough, but I think it would have helped a lot. As it is though, I don't know what else to try. So I'm going to try something, or at least I think I'm going to try something very, very unconventional. I mean, it's something I've never tried before and may never try again. But I'm going to take all these clamps off of here. I'm going to see how the binding fits the sides. I want to reuse this binding so that it doesn't look like it's been replaced. So what I was thinking of trying, and again, I seriously don't know if this will work, is just take this binding before I end up breaking it and gluing it back in the slot. There's a slot here all the way around. And I'm thinking of just gluing this binding into the sides like they are, then setting the top inside of this, and then squeezing it together the best I can, clamping it back down to this. There will be gaps between the back and the binding in places, and the only option I would have then would be to fill the gap between the sides and the binding. But I'm seriously telling you, I don't think there's a person on the planet that could make this go together the way this thing is presently. The only way it could happen would be to cut some length out of the sides, and it's too late for that at this point, and I'm not going to take it apart and do that. It would just not make sense to do that at this point. So that's the way I'm going to try to approach it, because I want to reuse this binding, and if I monkey around with that top and get it glued on there, then this binding's not going to go back on here and look good around the edges. But if I go ahead and make the binding look good on the edges and then just lay the top in there, then the only defect will be right around the top edge, between the top edge and the binding, and I can just fill that, I think. And I think that's the lesser of the evils in this particular case. So that's what I'm going to try. I mentioned earlier that I'm going to try to do something non-conventional. I'm going to glue the binding to the rim of these sides. Now, I wouldn't do that except for two reasons. Number one, this old antique binding is still in one piece. That's the first reason. And the second reason is there's a little tiny trough all the way around here. In other words, the kerf sets up just ever so slightly higher than the sides, so I can glue this binding right back to the sides and get it glued to the kerf as well. In addition to that, the advantage of this is when you look at this, then this binding will be perfectly smooth to these sides all the way around. If, on the other hand, I glued this binding to the back and then tried to put the back on here, I would not be able to get it to match up perfectly all the way around. And I won't be able to get the back to match up perfectly even after I do it this way. The difference is I'll be able to fill between the back and the binding and get rid of that, space. At least that's my plan. So here we go. I'm going to use this super phatic glue. I was testing this stuff out the other day. It dries quickly and it dries very strong, and I think it's the perfect glue for this application. So here we go. This stuff has really fast tack time, which is awesome for an application like this. It's also awesome that it cleans up with water, so I can hold it in place with my fingers like this and then clean it up really quick. I'm going to get some little violin clamps, I think, and try clamping this down lightly with the violin clamps to keep it in place. Well, you can see I've got the clamps on there, and now I'm going to extend this on around. I will say one thing about this method is I can really line up the edge very well. So it's looking really good. I'm kind of impressed how nicely it's lining back up. I'm getting the binding and all the little tear out pieces that were attached to the binding exactly back in the right place. And so it's filling all the little holes and nooks and crannies, and it's really looking good. Better than I expected on this, by far. Oddly enough, or I guess I shouldn't say it's odd, I expected it and it is there. This is warped up right here, and that's where the back was very warped up. This is much harder to get this back down in place than the rest of it. It's spent a lot of years warped, and it doesn't want to flatten back out, I can tell you. So the back's going to be fun clamping it down in that spot there too when I get to the back. Well, I'm just working my way on around. I don't have enough of these small clamps, so I'm taking them off of where I started. This stuff has a quick tack time, so I don't think that's going to be a problem as long as I keep working slow and, get it all around here. But it does look like it's lining up very, very well. There's no way I could have lined it up this well any other way. So at least that part of the method is working. Don't know if it's going to be real successful on the rest of it, but this part of it is successful. I'll show you what it looks like when I'm finished. Well, that went pretty painless for a change. That actually went very easy. Based on that, and if the same circumstances came up again, I'd probably do it again because that went real well. The binding is on there just almost as perfect as it can be around the edges. It would be hard to get that binding any better than that. Now, this one little piece of binding, if you recall, when this broke out of here, I saved it, and I have not tested it yet, but it would be really cool if that binding little piece would just fit right in there like it should. Well, the truth of it is, it will fit in there, but there must be another piece missing that I'm not aware of. Well, just as I suspected, that little piece fits in there perfectly back to the mating piece. That part's okay, but there's a gap of almost a 1/4 inch between the ends, and this other end did not break off. So, as I told you, these sides have somehow sprung out a 1/4 of an inch at the top. And I don't know how that's possible because I put them back together exactly like they were. In other words, the ends met up perfectly right down through the center here after I got it back together. Everything was absolutely perfect. So I don't know how they could have grown or gotten bigger by a 1/4 inch. So what my theory is, these sides were under stress all these years, and that's why this whole thing came apart to begin with. I would say they were put in some sort of a mold and pre-stressed into that mold somehow, and they just wanted to be bigger than that. And the back was glued on there and held it in place, but now that we've taken that back off, you know, it just kind of sprung itself out. And don't get me wrong, it had already sprung itself out before I took the rest of the back off. It was already hard to match back up. You couldn't really match it up at that point. So it does follow exactly what I thought. I seriously thought that these sides are about a 1/4 inch too big in perimeter for this. So we're just gonna have to do the best we can with it when we put it back together. It's not gonna be perfect. My friends, this has turned out pretty well. I don't have the back glued in there yet, but I set it down inside the binding, and that was the way to go on this one, I gotta tell you. It's still not gonna work. I mean, I'm still gonna have spaces, but it's gonna even it out a lot and make it look a lot better. My only reservation is superphatic glue really holds the binding pretty tightly. I think it's gonna hold it okay, but you know, I'm gonna have to put a lot of force on this, and I'm afraid the binding might come loose in a place or two, but I hope not. This really turned out pretty good this way. I mean, it makes it fit much tighter. See, at the bottom down here, you can see there's quite a bit of space, and it's going to be difficult to fill that because when you push the back in there, then the sides spring out to the side. So it just doesn't work as easy. Like I said, the perimeter of these sides is just a little bit too big. In fact, here's exactly how much too big it is. See the little white spot there? That's how much binding I had to fill in because the binding wasn't long enough to go completely around those sides. It's just the way it is. And you think, well, it did it once. Well, that's because when they made it originally, first of all, the binding was probably more flexible, and it's probably shrunk a little over the years. And secondarily, they probably had it in some sort of a compression form to hold those sides in. The sides just didn't want to stay in, that's all. Which is why I think it all came apart. But anyway, be that as it may, we can only do with what we have to work with. I'm going to try to get the tight bond in here now and glue these sides back down. I'm not sure how I'm going to do that yet because the clamps that go around the edges would impede the clamps that are going to squeeze it. So I've got to think about all that and decide which way to go. I'll show you what I come up with. My friends, there comes a time when you just have to make like a Nike commercial and just do it. And that's what we're going to do. I've got it kind of semi-tightened up in these little clamps that I have around here just to kind of get the shape close. I've already had the back in there and it's as close as it'll ever be. I still need to put the other clamp on it yet from the front to the back. And we'll get that on there after we get the back in here. Right now, I'm just going to get glue spread all around because it's just time to do it. It's working, but it is not simple. Well, the camera's not in real good position, but there's just not a lot of room to get it all in here on this narrow bench. Trying my best to get it all clamped here. It's really a tough clamp job. Very tough job. It's working. I might be satisfied with this. It looks like it's gonna work. I don't think I'm gonna have to take it back apart, but it's not the best. Wanted better, but this is about what I'm gonna get, and I don't think I'm gonna get any better. So I'm just gonna keep going. It's clamping, and I keep seeing glue squeeze out, so I know it's working. There's some glue squeeze out on that side I didn't see. I hope there's not a lot of that around. Boy, this is a tough one. I've never had one any tougher than this as far as trying to get it back together. Okay, so I've got all that. Now I'm going to just tighten this back up and tighten this back up a little bit just to draw it in a little bit more. I hope I don't screw it up by doing that. Not much I can do with this. It feels like it's down pretty much everywhere, as much as I can get it down anyway. It is not simple. One of the toughest ones I've ever done in my life. I've been working away on this old guitar off camera, and it just dawned on me that I really ought to show you at least some of this, what I'm doing, before I finish it, because you won't have much of a basis of comparison. The binding has just been really nasty. You can see how nasty it is, and I've cleaned it all up to look like that. Some of it was just solid black all the way around. Most of that is just old glue and junk that people have put on there over the years trying to fix it. And it was just solid like that pretty much everywhere. And I'm almost finished cleaning it up now, so I just thought I at least ought to show you what I've done. And I've just gone around basically with a single edge razor blade like this and just scraped it all clean, just to get rid of all the junk, because there is just a ton of junk. Again, that's not patina, folks. That's just junk. It's old glue, it's just piled up crud. Probably old DNA, everything. We're on the downhill slide, so assuming, and I'm making one big assumption here, assuming that neck angle is accurate, which I really didn't have any way of testing it while I was gluing this back together because of the way it was apart and the way I had to force it back together. But assuming that the neck angle is right, we're going to be stringing this baby up as soon as we get the new tuners. Let's just go ahead and look at the neck angle real quick and see how much I'm going to be crying here, because I have a feeling I'm going to be crying if it ain't right. I just hope it's right. Okay, I have not tested this yet, so let's see. Oh my gosh, it's almost perfect. It's just almost perfect. That is a total surprise to me. You may think I tested it off camera, but I did not. That's my first look at it, and I am tickled that it's that close. I really had no way of testing it. I had to put it under such stress just to get this back in some shape that was similar to the back. You know, with all those weird clamps hanging on there and everything, I couldn't even pick it up and turn it over because the clamps would have fallen off. They were putting stress, but they weren't on so tight that they could be moved. So I had no way of testing it, and it's just pure luck, to be perfectly honest with you, that the neck angle is right. So I am one happy camper. As soon as those tuning keys are here, we'll be able to string it up. Though we do have a lot more cosmetic work yet. There's still a lot of binding work to be done around the fretboard. There's still a lot of work to be done. I guess I shouldn't get too anxious, because I still have a lot to do. Friends, I want to give you a detailed look at what the real problem was. You've heard me talking about the back was smaller than the sides, and so it doesn't amount to a whole lot now, although you can see it. So I think before I stain it, I want you to see it. Maybe you can see there, if I can get it in the right focal length, where you see the white inside the yellow binding. The white between the binding and the wood is the fill that I had to do, and you can see it in several places. I had to fill in quite a few places, even up here. So there's places where I had to fill. Anyway, the bottom line is that the back just wasn't as big as the sides were. That's just the way it is.
And there's nothing I can do about that. I made the sides go back exactly where they were when this thing was built originally. So as I've already said, either the sides somehow just were under super tension when they were glued in place and they just kept expanding outward, or the back has shrunk, which is also possible, and it could be a combination of both of those things, I guess. It pulled the back apart right here because the side's springing out. It also cracked the back in another place right here. So, you know, obviously there was tension. You know, it cracked the back here and it cracked the back here at the seam. So now we're going to go back through and we're going to touch up all this, you know, where I've cleaned it all up this morning. It really feels perfect. I mean, it feels absolutely smooth and perfect. You can't really feel the transition from the wood to the binding anywhere. And now if we can stain it, you know, make it look real good, then, you know, it's about as good as it can be done, I believe. So here we go. My friends, now that I've got the back and binding just as good as I can get it, I guess I'm going to turn my attention toward this neck and that joint where they had put that glue on there. And it amazes me how much glue they got on the outside and didn't get a drop on the inside. Not a drop. It's amazing to me. So I'm going to try to clean that up. Now, that's not that easy to do because it's really old, dried, crystallized glue. Nothing's going to cut it. I've already tried different things. So the bottom line is you just got to get rid of it somehow. And the only way I can think of to get rid of it is to scrape it off. So that's what I'm going to do. So when I've got to do detail type scrapings like this, what I generally do is take the round bladed X-Acto knife, and I can control that very well, and I can just give a light touch. So that's what I'm using for my scraping here. I think once I get this all scraped off, the joint itself is actually going to look pretty good. Trying to just scrape off the glue and not really mess with the finish, but that's not all that easy to do. You can do it though if you're careful. All right, I don't know how well that'll show up, but there's a before. Let's see if we can get the camera to focus a little bit better. There's a before look, and you can see all the glue piled up. And there's an after look, which you might think looks worse, but it's perfectly smooth now. And we might be able to sand that a little bit and clean it up a little bit more, and then maybe even buff it a little bit and maybe make that go away. But you don't really feel the joint here, where here you just feel all that glue. There's just tons of glue piled up. So we'll just work on that and we'll show you what it looks like when we're finished. So there's another close-up of it after it's cleaned up, and it looks a lot better to me. I've already filled all the little holes up here in the peg head where the screw holes used to be. Got that done. Now I'm going to turn my attention to the peg head itself and try to clean it up. Some of the veneer is coming loose up here. You might be able to see that move. Kind of chipped out up in this area here. Doesn't look like we're missing much pearl, just a tiny, tiny little piece of pearl. And if I can get a piece that I can fit in there, I'll fit it in there. We're gonna just try cleaning this up and making it stable, because it's not very stable right now. The first thing I've already done is I've taken my X-Acto knife and I've taken the back edge of that little blade and I've reached in there and I pulled out any dirt that I could get out of there. Now I'm going to take the tight bond, and again, using the bottle like a syringe, force it up to that hole and squeeze it in there and try to force the glue back under there. Generally that actually works. Might not work as well in this case since we're dealing with a round area here. Now I'll just take the X-Acto knife and slide it back under there with the glue on it and try to get the glue back in there as far as I can. I feel like I've got enough coverage already to hold that little bit of veneer down. The better you can get it in there, the better I like it. I'm going to dampen the bristles on the paintbrush, get a hold of the glue and slide it back in there. That goes back in there a lot further than you think.
and it forces glue ahead of itself so that it's squeezing the glue way back in there. I think that's as good as it needs to be done. Pretty sure when I squeeze this down, you'll see all kinds of glue squeezing out of there. Feel confident you will anyway. And I'll just use this. This has rubber pads on it. It ought to work pretty good for clamping this. Yep, it's squeezing out pretty good. You can see where the glue is all squeezed back out. So plenty of glue up in there, I believe. All right, we'll let that set for a little while and then we'll work on some more. There's a tiny little bit of this inlay that's missing in the word the between the H here and the E. It's just a little hook of inlay. I went through my scrap bins and found some mother of pearl, and I think I can make something out of part of this that will fill that in and barely be able to tell it. So I've got a little board set up here for sawing out. We'll just give it a shot. I don't know. It's pretty hard to match something that tiny. It'll be very difficult to cut this without breaking it, but I'm going to give it a shot. I'm going to put on my dust mask because this stuff is not good to breathe. Well, there's the little piece I sawed out. You know, it'll probably take some hand fitting to make it work, and it may not even work at all until I saw a whole new piece. You never know, but I'll give it a shot here and see if I can make it fit in there. I've got the little part made for this. I can't say it's 100% gonna fit yet. It's pretty close. It's so tiny, and just a breath can knock it off of here, so I'm trying to be real careful. I haven't actually got it to fit in the hole yet. That's the problem that I'm running into. And I doubt it's gonna fit in the hole on camera because why would it? Doesn't look like it's ready to fit yet, but it's getting real close. It's so tiny. All right, I think I'm gonna have to cut a little bit more off of this long end in order for it to fit in there well. May also have a little bit of dirt in between here that I can scrape out. Let's try it again, one more time, because if it'll fit in there, I don't want to keep filing if it'll fit. Very close. Oh my gosh, it's so close. More work, maybe the next time we'll get it in there. Almost sure I can get it down in there this time. Got it started down in there. It just doesn't want to turn the right direction. Thinking I might be able to force it now. I use the right tool. Almost. Oh, it's so close. You can't get one much closer without fitting than that right there. I'm going to try to see if I can carve out a little more junk out of the way. Got my finger over the little part so it doesn't fall off of here or I don't accidentally blow it away. Try it one more time. Oh, it's so hard. And it turns over on me and it gets upside down and it's hard to tell which side goes up because it's almost the same. Oh, it's so close. I think I got it. Wow, there you go. Can you see it? That's the part I put in right there, the little white piece. Oh my gosh, that's probably the tiniest little missing inlay piece I've ever probably done. Trying to get it lined up just a tiny bit better. It could just be a hair better, but I think I probably better know when to quit here and call that good enough, because I'll end up blowing it out of there and losing it or breaking it or something. I'm going to glue that into place with the CA glue. The reason I use CA glue on something like that is it penetrates everywhere. I'm going to put CA glue over this whole area because I have a feeling or suspicion that there's cracks and little crevices under this stuff that you can't see. Put the CA glue on there like that and then just wipe it right off. And you really can't hardly tell you've done anything, yet the CA glue is already penetrated and gone under there. So to me, that's the good way to handle something like that in this particular case. That'll lock everything in. Now we've got a little spot here. We got some holes to fill, and I'm going to clean all that up. So take this as your before look, and then you're going to get an after look here in just a minute.